Live. So let's see who's in here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our July community call. It's been a while since we've seen each other, and it's great to see a lot of familiar names and faces. So yeah, we have a fewer people than usual this time. I think it's the vacation season already, or right? Is there anyone here who's joining for the first time? I wonder. Just like message on the chat, type in the chat. Toby has raised his hand. Hello. Welcome, welcome. Let's see if there's anyone. Oh, yeah, someone also on YouTube is here for the first time. Hello, welcome. Right. So, yeah, because there's some for timers, so I just wanted to introduce myself. Hello, I'm Faye. You might see me in the forum. I'm the community manager for Checkmk. And yeah, we do this community call to gather community members and talk about things around Checkmk. It could be around the product, show some cool demos, and answer your questions. Right. So for this time's community call, we have two topics on the agenda. So right now we have Thomas Lippert, our Director for Product Management, to talk about the results of the product polls in the Checkmk conference. And then we also have Sudhir, who's gonna demo how you can get started with Kubernetes monitoring. So before I hand over the mic to Thomas, I just have to go through some logistics information, right? So this call will be recorded and streamed live on Checkmk YouTube channel. So if you're not comfortable having your face, yeah, just feel free to like turn off your camera, or also change your name if you're also not comfortable having that recorded. So feel free to type in your questions or comments, side comments on the chat. So this is a very casual call. So we're very respectable here. So I think everything will respect the rule. Everyone will respect the rules. So just we're chill. Just message if you have anything, and then we'll just go through your questions or your comments on the chat. So we'll just take time to go through that, but we will address all of the questions as soon as we can. So just please keep your mic muted when you're not speaking. And we will also have an open mic session soon after each session where you can have an opportunity to turn on your mic and ask your questions verbally. Right. So with all those stuff said, so let's start. So Thomas, are you ready?
Yes, I hope, if Windows doesn't let me down. I just had an interesting experience, but I couldn't click anything. Can I share my screen? This one. So I hope you can see a slide deck now.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, first welcome from my side as well. As Faye has announced it, I want to give a little bit of insights into the results of the polls we had during the Checkmk 7 conference. I color-coded the results a little bit, so things marked in red are feature which we either have already delivered or are on our roadmap for version 2.1. So we have a higher confidence level. And I also marked things in blue, features in blue, which we are actively investigating, and which are aspirational for version 2.1 or 2.2. So here the level of confidence is lower. But just to give you an idea of, there's a few differences between those two levels. And as this is also kind of a roadmap presentation, I have as a good product manager, I have to show a little bit of a roadmap slide to just be aware that while we make the statements in best confidence, we have evaluated them very well. They are not a binding commitment, and things might change as the environment is changing. So let's now jump to the poll results. First, we ask about the Checkmk version 2. What features you like best? What have been the improvements you have seen which are best? And at the very top, there are 4 features. I marked them, which you all rated, or the participants rated all as like the most important ones. And we really appreciate that feedback, because we spent a lot of effort in our redesigned user interface. That was one of the major things we planned for the version 2. We also invested heavily into a new REST-based API, which should become a way to kind of automate, externally drive Checkmk to do all the things you want to do in a modern IT environment. We also invested heavily into an API which allows you to create agent extensions or plugins, so it makes it easier for you to add more tests, custom tests, and run them through Checkmk. And finally, at the very end of this top list, powerful dashboards. So our investment here and show you some dashboards, give you the abilities to create very good presentation of your data you collect with Checkmk, was the fourth area which were important to you. So yeah, thank you for that feedback. It's always important for our developers as they invested quite some time and effort to make them running. And all the rest is also done. It's just interesting about how you rate those different things. Then let's look into the next pause, which were about our future priorities. So we ask which areas we should invest in the future. And here's like the results. First of all, you want us to go beyond what we currently do, to go into new things like log management or showing logs, detecting dependencies between different services and basically errors we find in those services. Look into end-to-end monitoring or add more metrics. That was one of the things which you want us, or which is the things you want us to go to most. And the second one is a more technical thing for existing customers. So single sign-on and or two-factor authentication was very top. And at the end of my presentation, I have a little bit more detailed poll, which gives us very clear indication of where we should invest. There are other areas here which are important for you, like closely followed by the single sign-on is the BI investment. And we focus for our work as product managers and then as engineering on the first two areas for that moment. Of course, there are various improvements in other areas of the product, but they are not the focus area here. So they will not become like a major part of the roadmap for version 2.1. But that's the rest of the list. So BI is important. On Checkmk app or mobile UI, so you can basically do things on your mobile phone, and additional coverage, more checks and agent. That's what we do on a constant base. If you look a little bit further into the new areas of investment, we ask about the 4 categories listed, like better application monitoring, end-to-end monitoring, dependencies and correlations, and expansion of log management. And we had this like catch-all category of something other. And it turned out that all the 4 areas were really close together, with just the application monitoring leading a little bit and closely followed by the end-to-end monitoring. So we took this result as an indication from you that we should focus our research activities into those 2 areas and see where we can find improvements here or how we can do integrations here, which add to those 2 areas. Interesting enough, we also ask about product integration areas. So where should Checkmk integrate with, not expand to, but integrate with. And also here, the log management, the end-to-end monitoring were very much at the top. Quite interesting. So that's also a good indication of where we should invest our time here. And the third point is you want us to do more in infrastructure as a code, making Checkmk deployable with Ansible or Terraform or CloudFormation, and also basically being able to monitor the deployment through with those tools through Checkmk if you automate things. Those are the very top ratings here, and that's also the areas we will look into how we can implement them, or what of those things we can improve Checkmk on. The next area was about UX improvements. So we run a longer session about various improvements on the UX side and ask detailed questions. My presentation here is only the summary of those basically polls. So first we ask, are you interested about any application-specific dashboards? And as you can see, there's like vSphere, Linux, Kubernetes, and Windows were leading at the very top, and then it falls up very quickly. And those are also areas where we will invest as part of a version 2.1 release. And Kubernetes will be done as part of our Kubernetes extensions and activities, but also having a good Linux dashboard is important, and of course the vSphere cluster. And we already showed on the during the conference a first draft of our application-specific dashboard for Linux which should be delivered off the shelf as part of the next release. And here's this draft, where you get an idea about like uptime, memory, CPUs, and swap space. And so a little bit of like inventory information. And then you have an overview about those areas as well as they do. So CPU, memory, disk, and the network interface, how well they are doing. So you can really drill into a dedicated server and see how they perform without going into like the monitored services which might run on that server. Then we ask about general dashboarding priorities, and at the very top, and that was also a side discussion in the Slack channel during the presentation, about having the ability to share dashboard in a simple way via URL. And that was something which we didn't have on our initial lists when we did go into the presentation, but as it turned out, it was quite a hot topic where a lot of customers were very keen on. So that's why we will investigate that now as part of our like results, or taking on the results of the conference and see what we can do. The general idea here behind that feature is that you might run in your like system operation center or network operation center several large screens, or maybe you run large screens in a production site, and on that screens you want to show specific parts of your IT infrastructure in a very high level world that people quickly recognize if everything is running fine, or there are areas where we need to investigate further. And as those screens permanently run, they need to be like set up and maybe reloaded very quickly without the need of like logging in or having credentials or so. And that's the idea here, making somehow URLs available, which are specially created, crafted, which allow you to show a screen and provide the security around them, so that you can't go from those URLs further into the system or do changes or so. So you can really run them, for example, on TV screens. That was one of the requests which came up during the customer conversation. We ask about also area for improvement within Checkmk, and here quite interesting, there was one thing which was really hot, and apparently there's a high need of existing customers, is managing hosts and folders. And that's something we also take as an outcome here. We will investigate how we can make the managing of hosts and folders simpler, streamline the UI, speed up those management tasks. So that was the clear winner of that question. And so that's an area for us, or an indication for us to invest here and improve that operations in that area. And finally, we ask about like future areas where we are currently already work in progress, and try to get some of your feedback in the area of managing and monitoring the cloud, and in the area of Kubernetes. So the first question was about, of the many AWS services, I think they are now offering 108 services, which one should we monitor? So we offered a longer list here, and we did go into, or our initial proposal was with other areas. So for example, there should be, what's here at the very end, AWS SQS, the message queue would have been on our list without asking customers for feedback, but apparently there are other areas which are far more important for you as users, as customers of Checkmk. Therefore, we will rearrange our roadmap and take care to handle the top 4 here on that list. So the Elastic Container Service that's running Docker images in AWS, Health, the general AWS Health information, Lambda, so serverless functions, which is already work in progress, and the Route 53, that's DNS rewriting, and also can be used for sometimes for load balancing and that stuff. So monitoring those services will be our priority, and we try to achieve for them, deliver those checks as part of our version 2.1 release. We ask the same question for Azure, obviously, and also interesting, we did get a very similar, or quite an aligned set of requests here as well. So health here came at the very top, also much higher than we initially planned. Then where we currently were missing a load balancer, which is either the Azure load balancer itself or the traffic manager, both can be used for load balancing with slightly different facets of how they are used, which are rated high here. And monitoring databases, non-Microsoft database on Azure is also quite high. Again, here, that's something we'll take into account. We'll build checks to monitor them properly. And finally, around Kubernetes, we ask, okay, from all the many Kubernetes distributions, which one is the one you care most about it? And of course, it has a higher number of votes for no for the users who don't use Kubernetes. But from the rest, the plain vanilla Kubernetes was at the very top, followed by OpenShift and Rancher. Rancher, we assume, is also due to the fact that we are here in SUSE country, so Germany is still very SUSE oriented, but the rest is like AKS, GKS, or EKS are all not at the very high priority at the moment. So our main focus initially is to support with our Kubernetes effort the plain vanilla Kubernetes. And finally, also driven by the feedback we received for the single sign-on and two-factor authentication topic, we ask about how should we implement it. So this was more a question about how. And we ask about many options here, from like Google Authenticator to SAML to Active Directory and that like. And it turns out that a generic SAML2 implementation is the feature or the functionality you want to see in Checkmk most. So that's also what we will take into our account. We will look into that one and hope to deliver that one as part of Checkmk 2.1. And with that, I want to thank you and hand back to Faye, or basically ask you questions, answer your questions.
Right. Someone already started asking questions. So Ziad
Okay.
asked, what about Docker Swarm?
Sorry, I didn't understand you properly.
Oh, sorry. What about Docker Swarm? But then Martin replied something. Isn't Docker Swarm dead?
Okay. So currently we have no plans for this one. Is it like generic, or is it as part of any cloud implementation where this should be done?
Docker Swarm was the thing which Docker tried to promote
instead of
managing containers, and didn't pick up as much adoption as the others.
Yeah, same. It's also quite interesting that in AWS you have the Elastic Container Service, which is still continued, but apparently Azure has moved away from their container service solution, like custom solution, to the Kubernetes solution, making an announcement about end of life or that solution, their homegrown container solution, in favor of a Kubernetes implementation within Azure. Well, let me see, there's other questions.
Ralph asked, any plans for Kubernetes for VMware Tanzu?
I think that's a question for you, Martin, as you drive the Kubernetes project.
So our plan is to build something which should work for all Kubernetes distros. But we will not test it for every distro out there, because they all have the particularities. But the goal is that basically it should work, but you never know, because all have their own restrictions. And over time, we will start to adapt the general approach for the specific distributions.
Any further question to the poll results, or to like this outlook into Checkmk? Apparently not. So I think I hand it back to you, Faye, and will answer any questions. Stay online. So if anybody has a question coming up later, then I will answer them during the presentation.
I think Ziad has a follow-up question. Is this a follow-up question, Ziad, or Just a comment.
Yeah, Postgres. Yes, Postgres. I'm not sure. Is it a question or is it a statement?
I think the question is for Postgres, if you have Postgres clusters like MySQL clusters, monitoring of them. Because for MySQL and stuff, we have cluster support there. And do we have the same? Do we have replication checks or cluster support for Postgres?
If I recall it correctly, and like if I do it wrong, I check it tomorrow. But if I do it wrong, then Faye will send Faye an update on that one. We currently do not have it, but you might recall from the presentation that we were looking into like investing into application monitoring. And for us, application monitoring is first of all, proper monitoring for all the different parts of the stack. So the database, the application server of various kind. So that's something we will invest more if we drive that area further. And if Postgres cluster is not properly supported, then this is something we'll look into. There's a tool. Is it Pastrami? I would need to look it up. There was one common way of clustering Postgres, which we had a look into. Is Rep Manager the tool? So see at you just throw a few words in the chat, which makes it hard to understand.
The tool is called Rep Manager. That does it for Postgres, and yeah, but you have to, like, we don't have a check for that right now. But as Thomas said, building stuff. If we do something specifically for Postgres for that, can't promise anything yet. But
it's the tool I was talking for is called Patroni. That's where we had a look into. Sorry, I messed that up. So let me see Postgres. Sure.
Right now, there's no check which exists for that part.
Okay, so that's what I had in my mind as well, but I wanted to check. But if you know better, or if you know already, then I think that's something on our list. Any other questions? That's a post I have at the end, and apparently it has a round middle image, and it's sometimes recognized as my head or as an extension to my head. So it's a little bit confusing. Sorry.
Right, Cox has a question about dashboards. So we haven't done any work with 2.0, but with regards to dashboards, are they templatable? That is, do dashboards now support a way to apply a dashboard across a group?
That was one of the questions, and we might invest here, but that's not yet decided. So we do some improvements here, but like having the ability to like select live on the dashboard a particular like.
But you can do it. I mean, that's basically, that's a feature in 2.0 which was added, filtering for dashboards. So if you say you have a dashboard and you just want to see that dashboard for a specific group, let's say your Linux servers or whatever tags or labels you have applied, you can then just add this as a filter, and then you can have basically one dashboard you use as a template and use it for different filters.
Okay, misunderstood you. So it's about having one dashboard and mixing a dashboard and a filter to it, not doing it live.
I hope that's what you asked, Christopher.
Okay.
Right. We have another question from YouTube. Are there any plans on a NAGVIS alternative made from Checkmk? This is from Norm.
That's a good question. We get several times. We haven't yet made up any decisions here on whether we include some or part of the functionality. What would be interesting is to learn which part of the NAGVIS functionality we like to see most as part of like within Checkmk. It offers several like slide parts. So please, if you have a strong intent here, and go to the Checkmk forum and give a feedback about which use case you like to see built natively into Checkmk.
Don't forget the other question there, but it's
Yes, I was thinking that that is something that is for the forum. Or?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, but yeah, ask it in the forum.
Yeah, right. About the question if Checkmk can be deployed, yeah, please ask it in the forum. Yep, I think that's all the questions that we have for now for this topic. Then, thanks a lot for questions. Thanks a lot, Thomas, for going through this results of the conference polls. Now we can go to our next topic. I'm just gonna check if Sudhir is ready. Are you ready to Sudhir? Or with all your setup?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
I hope it works.
Yes, I hope it works too. Right, so now I will hand over the mic to Sudhir to show us some demos on Kubernetes monitoring.
All right, let me share my screen with you guys. So is everybody able to see my screen? Can Faye or Martin confirm that quickly?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I have prepared a small presentation for this community call. First of all, welcome everybody. My name is Sudhir Chauhan. I'm a Checkmk consultant here at Tribe29. And today I will be talking about Kubernetes monitoring, wherein I will be showing you, I have a simple 3-step approach, wherein I will be showing you the steps how you can bring your single Kubernetes cluster or multiple Kubernetes cluster inside Checkmk and how to make sense out of the data that comes from these different Kubernetes clusters. This is my 3-step approach, wherein I will show you, wherein I'll be showing you how to set up the Kubernetes data source rule, add the Kubernetes objects to the monitoring, which includes the nodes and all the different objects like daemon sets, deployments, pods, and they will be namespace prefixed, but I will also show you another cool way how you could segregate the data between 2 different clusters. And the third step is actually, the second and the third step is actually related to each other, because when we make sense out of the data, then we can create the objects in a more meaningful way. Otherwise, we can also create the objects, for example, the nodes in the beginning, and then try changing the piggyback data the way we want. So let's get started with our first step, which is the Kubernetes data source rule. As you have already guessed by the name, it's a rule in Checkmk, and this rule is available in the setup menu. You have to search for the keyword Kubernetes, and you will find that rule. Before so in my demo today, I have 2 Google Cloud clusters, which I have named as ptribe29 demo and ttribe29 demo. And both are identical clusters, and they have 3 nodes each. And I will I will try to set up the monitoring for both the clusters. As a first step, I have created the host with the IP addresses of the control plane, which is basically my Kubernetes master or the Kubernetes control plane. And this was the rule. This is the data source rule. So when you search for the word Kubernetes under VM Cloud Container topic, you will find this entry, Kubernetes. And this is basically the rule. Before I talk more about the rule, I would like to explain you what are the prerequisites that we need at the cluster level. So for Checkmk to monitor Kubernetes, Checkmk should be in a position to connect to the Kubernetes via the API. For that, it needs a service account, it needs a cluster role, and a token and a certificate. Let's jump to the command line, wherein I will show you how these things looks like. All right. I hope everybody can see the command line. Maybe Faye, can you confirm if the size is enough, or shall I increase the font or decrease the font?
I think it looks great.
Okay, that's good. So in order to create the cluster role and the service account, we have a ready-made template which is stored on if you are on Checkmk. Right now, I'm on Checkmk 2.0 P7, Community Enterprise Edition, but you can also do it on, even if you are on raw, it will be in the same path. So it will be stored under shared doc Checkmk treasures, Kubernetes. If you can also find the same YAML file. It's basically a ready-made YAML file. This YAML file is also available on our Checkmk documentation for Kubernetes. It's basically when you click there, it directly points to the GitHub URL, but you could also fetch it from here. Now, what we are doing inside this YAML file is we are creating a namespace, Checkmk, and a service account inside the name. And within the namespace, we are creating a service account, a cluster role, and then we are granting permissions to these different objects. So the permissions that we are granting is get and list. And apart from that, we are also granting some permissions to other API groups like custom metrics, some non-resource URLs, but it's all read-only permissions. So because we are using only get on all the different objects here. And last but not the least, we are creating a cluster role binding. So once you have applied this checkmk rback.yaml file, this will create a service account. It will create the cluster role and cluster role binding. Now let's see how this data, how we can use data to configure the data source rule. So I have my Kubernetes cluster. I have already saved the configuration on my system. And if I try to query the service account in my Checkmk namespace, it will display with this information. So it will display you with the secret. And if you want to see what is inside the secret, so basically it will show you a certificate with the ca.cert, and then there's a token. Now you cannot just copy paste here and save it inside Checkmk. Basically, we need a certificate and a token to be stored inside Checkmk so that Checkmk special agent can talk to the Kubernetes API. But this information is base 64 encoded, and you have to decode this information. To decode this information, we have to execute the same command, and there are some command line, and there is a base64 decode command with which you can decode the certificate as well as the token. For example, if I execute the same command, grep for the ca.cert, and pipe it with the cut and the base64 decode, I will see the certificate like this. So this is the certificate that is supposed to be used. This is the certificate that is needed by Checkmk. You can copy the certificate and upload to our certificate trust store, which I will also show you. And similar way, you can also do it for your token. You don't have to remember the command. This is also there in our documentation. These are actually the same commands which are from there. So the token that you get, this is available like this. You can copy it in our password store and give it a unique name so that this name can be pointed out directly in our data source rule. Now let's move on to the web interface again, and I will show you how to use these values inside our Kubernetes data source rule. So right now I have set up it for 2 different clusters, but I will just show you for one of the clusters. It's a standard rule, which is divided into 3 parts. It has a role properties where you can describe why you are creating this rule with a comment. You can also put some links to a ticket or to a Confluence page or any documentation repository that you use in your organization. And the second part is interesting, where the real configuration basically happens. Here I have chosen that my API server endpoint will be an IP address. And then there will be, I have chosen the port. So all this information can be fetched when you just run a kubectl config view. Under the cluster, there will be a server URL with the port. If there is no port specified, then normally it is HTTPS. So by default, it's 443. But while using Minikube and using some on-premise setups, I have seen that sometimes I have to put 8443 or 6443 here. So depending on the kind of environment you have to decide the port, as well as you also have an option to choose a host name or custom URL. And you can also, if you have a custom path prefix, then you can also supply it here. Now, this is the place where you have to save the token. Since I already saved in the password store, you can refer it here directly from your password store like this. And since I think I didn't show you how the certificate looks like. So you can just search for the word cert here, and this will show you the trusted certificated authorities for SSL. As soon as I click on that, it will show you the certificates which I showed you in the command line. This is the place where you have to upload the certificate. And I have uploaded 2 times because the one is for the production and one is for the test. And let's go back to our rule again. So we have verified certificate. You also can ignore some certificate errors, but that is unsecure and not recommended. I'm also using the namespace prefix. So when the piggyback information is returned from my master or my control plane node, then I want all the information to be namespace prefixed. I can also choose do not use a namespace prefix. You can feel free. It's up to you how you want to get the data inside Checkmk. Another thing is I'm retrieving everything, though I am not using job at the moment, but I was using it in my previous demos, so I have kept it as it is. And last but not the least, this option, if you want to fetch only particular namespaces and not all the namespaces, then you choose this option. And I've attached this rule to the cluster on which I'm basically setting the monitoring for. Similar way, I have Similar way, I have set up the the data source rule for ttribe 29, which is my test cluster, and ptribe 29 is my production cluster. So after you have set up the rule, let's see how so I have actually performed the service discovery in order to save time. If I look at the service of the host now, as you can see here, it is that if you look at the Checkmk service check, it is showing special underscore Kubernetes. This means that it is trying to fetch everything via the special agent and not via the agent. You can also verify this by going to the host configuration. And if you look at the host monitoring agents, I have selected the option. If API integration is configured, then use this. Otherwise, use the Checkmk agent. But in this case, we are using an API integration. So that's why you see the word special Kubernetes here. And and then you see the different monitoring metrics, like you see information about the components like controller manager, etcd, scheduler, the resource information about your CPU, memory, pod, and the information about all your namespaces that you have in your Kubernetes cluster. On the right-hand side, I like always keeping the checkmk command so that I can clearly distinguish between from where this check comes from. But I mean, I have just customized the view, but you can also, but this is not available in the default view. So I have actually enabled one more column which says just display the service check command. So as you can see, all the ones which you see the K8, they are coming from the Kubernetes API. And once they are retrieved, then the check plugin on the Checkmk side is parsing the data and creating the check side and creating these service checks. These are the standard Checkmk checks here, sorry. You also have inventory information. For example, if you would like to see what is the information that I'm getting for all of my Kubernetes objects. So you have nodes. So you are getting 3 nodes, and these are the nodes which are configured on my Kubernetes cluster. And then there are some roles. These are the roles, and these roles are and their respective namespaces are mentioned here in this list. So let's go back to the ptribe 29. Okay. Similar way, I have set it for the ttribe 29 as well. You will see almost the same checks. Maybe there is a difference between some namespaces because I have deployed some additional pods or deployments on my test Kubernetes cluster. So otherwise, the checks are almost the same on my test Kubernetes cluster. So this is actually the first step, how to create the data source rule and how to bring the data from your Kubernetes cluster inside Checkmk. Right now, we just have the master or the control plane being monitored, but now we will try to add the other Kubernetes objects, which are the nodes, deployments, daemon sets, and so many other objects which are available on that Kubernetes cluster. So right now we have finished step 1. Now we are moving on to step 2, which is how to add the Kubernetes objects to the monitoring. So to show that, I would like to show you first how does it look on the command line. So I will again now jump back to my terminal. So I'm right now logged into my site user again. Let's cd and go back to the main directory and temp checkmk piggyback. So this is the folder where all the piggyback information for your source host gets stored. If you do a simple ls, you will see that here you will see all your Kubernetes objects that are now queried from your master control plane, and now they are stored inside Checkmk. Either I can now create manually by adding one by one, or I can use the power of the feature known as dynamic host management, which is where DCD is one of the daemon that we have. If I can show you with an OMD status command. So this is the DCD daemon, and this daemon is responsible for this dynamic host management. It can create all these Kubernetes objects in a one single go. And this is actually the recommended way if you want to manage your dynamic environment. For example, in this environment, we will be destroying pods, we will be deleting the services, we will be adding services, we will be scaling our deployment. So the resources will be increasing and decreasing at the same time. And this will always be dynamic. So to handle this kind of scenario, we have the DCD daemon, whose goal is to automatically delete and create the host on the fly. So the moment there are changes in your dynamic environment, the D will detect those changes, and it will create those things and destroy those things, so that there are no dead bodies lying around in the monitoring. The monitoring is always up to date, and it responds to the changes that happens in the dynamic environment. Now, if we look at the data here, we already prefixed it with the namespace. We added, so if you look at the name of any of the, let's say, if you look at this pod, we have a kube system. This is a standard namespace in any Kubernetes installation. And then you have the Kubernetes object type, which is pod. And then you have the name of this object. So it's that's how this happened, because we have chosen the option that I want my namespace. I want all my Piggyback information to be prefixed with my namespace. So that's why you have all the objects prefixed with their namespaces. For example, I have created an active MQ namespace for a deployment, and my deployment name is also active MQ. Similar way, I have created a service where the service name is also active MQ. Now, if I have to quickly identify, if, for example, if I have to identify, okay, this is my Kubernetes object, but from which cluster does it come from? Or in a nutshell, if I have to make sense out of this data, it's very difficult, because if you look at the nodes, it's fine. All the nodes, they don't have a namespace, so they start with the name GKE-PE tribe 29. T tribe 29 is for the test, and P is for the production. Similar way, if you look on the kubeproxy pod, they also have the name of the nodes inside the name. So that's why it's easy to identify. But what about the others? I mean, if I have to make out from where this pod is coming from, if I'm in this directory, there is no way for me to find out. And similar way, if the DCD adds these objects inside Checkmk, then also it becomes quite confusing. I have no idea how to figure out, unless I directly log into my cluster and do a kubectl get pods hyphen and grep for this. Either I will grep for this last 5 characters, and from there I will able to figure out. Or another way, if you want to figure out, is just cd to this directory, and then you will see, this is coming from my test cluster. But wait a minute. Now, if we, this is now more generic. We have a kube system namespace, which is available on almost every Kubernetes deployment. And then you have, on every Kubernetes cluster. And then there is a service, which is also a very standard Kubernetes object. And then there is kubedns, which is also a very standard Kubernetes object, or standard Kubernetes name. So if I cd to this directory, you see that this particular object exists on my production as well as my test. But when I want to create it inside Checkmk, I want to segregate this data. I don't want, it looks like a hodgepodge. I mean, if there are clusters I'm monitoring, then there will be 3 files, because if I'm also using kubedns there, then I will have 3 files here. So how to do the segregation? For this, I have 2 simple rules. One is known as hostname translation of Piggyback host. And the second one is the DCD plus. So what DCD is going to do is it will filter for the host, and based on that, it will store those hosts in those respective folders. Now let's go back to the Checkmk web browser and see, and let me show you how those rules work. So right now we finished the step, we saw the step 2 and step 3. In the step 3, we talked about make sense of Piggyback data. And to make sense of Piggyback data, I have 2 rules. One is the hostname translation of Piggyback host and the DCD configuration. Now let's switch on to the Checkmk web UI. So I'm on this page. Let's search for the hostname translation. This is the hostname translation for Piggyback host. It's under the topic, this entry is under the topic access to agents. So let's click over here. And as you can see here now, I have created 2 rules separately for my 2 different clusters. What I'm doing here is basically a very simple thing in regular expressions. It's known as capturing groups. I'm capturing, I know that my first group is my namespace, and my second group is the name of my endpoint. So I'm prefixing it with the a name of my cluster, which is ptribe29, putting an underscore endpoint underscore, and then putting a /2. So this /2 is the name, which is here, and /1 is pointing from here, which is the namespace. So I'm converting everything which is coming as endpoint, deployment, stateful set, pod, I mean, all these Kubernetes objects, similarly doing it for the ttribe29. So replacing it with the single naming convention, so that let's say if I belong to a company where they follow a standard single naming convention, then I can just do something like this. I can create a standard naming convention in my monitoring the way I like. The data is coming in the way it should, but in Checkmk, using this rule, you can you can decide your own naming convention, how you would like to see the data inside Checkmk. So let's go ahead and activate these rules. I've actually disabled it because I wanted to. I actually configured it before, but just for the demo, I disabled it. So let's enable all the rules. And yeah, that's it. And let's activate the changes. And now I will go to the command line. And let's see if, before we go to the, yeah, let's go to the command line first and see how the data looks like. First of all, let's delete all these, all the other information. Basically, even if I don't delete it, this information will be there. And we have a cron job that runs we have a cron job, which is known as CMK cleanup piggyback. What this cron job does, it basically executes this command. So if you want to delete the outdated piggyback files, you could delete it on the fly with executing this command right away. Otherwise, there's a cron job that runs once a day at 12 a.m. in the night, 12 a.m. 10 in the night, and then it deletes these outdated files. So right now I will delete this information because I don't need it. But as you can see, I already also started seeing some information about my But yeah, let's delete everything, and we will reschedule the check so that it will only show the information that we are interested in. So let's go to the service. In order to recreate the piggyback data, I can just reschedule the check of my production, and the similar way I can reschedule the check of my test. So now let's go back to the command line again. And if we see that now, we will see that now all the data that we have is properly arranged the way I expected. It is clearly recognizable. I can easily read that it belongs to production and it's a pod. And at the end, I have a namespace. So this is how this is just one scenario. In a way, I was able to enrich the data, but you could choose another ways as well. You could also flip the namespace in the middle, or put the name, or just get rid of the namespace. Or you could also, I mean, there are different ways you could also achieve this.
By the way, one important thing to mention is if you have multiple clusters, then this is relevant. If you have only one cluster, then you don't need to do this.
That's right. Thanks, Martin. So let's let's now go back to Checkmk, and let's start adding the information. Let's start getting these objects that we have created now inside Checkmk. So right now, we have only 2 hosts, which are our control plane nodes, but let's start adding those hosts as well. So for that, you can go to host. Either you can directly go to dynamic host management from here, or you can also go to host and then related dynamic host management. So here I have created 3 DCD rules. The first DCD rule is basically creating all my cluster nodes. I have 6 nodes, 3 nodes on each cluster. So it will add those 3 nodes. Then I have a production cluster DCD, which will basically bring in all my objects, which you just saw under the temp Checkmk piggyback folder. It will only add the p-tribe29 -* objects inside my respective folders. And then there's a test cluster DCD, which will add all the t-tribe29 stuff there. For that, I have created 2 folders, which is p-tribe29 and t-tribe29 hosts. Under each folder, I have created these different object names, wherein I want to store all my endpoints here, all my ingress here, all jobs go here. Then the nodes go here, and stateful sets, daemon sets, services. Similar way, I have done the same thing in my test as well. Now let's go ahead and activate the rule and see what happens. So let's first activate let me first show you how the rule looks like. So this is the button where I can activate this connection. And what I'm doing in the rule is basically putting everything that starts with the GKE p-tribe29.star into the folder p-tribe29 nodes. And in the second element, I'm just replacing the P with the T here and storing it in a different folder. So this is being stored under t-tribe29 nodes. And when my nodes are created, it will have both type of data sources. It will have an API integration. It will have a Checkmk agent. I also set it to that it will have an IP address, and also it will use and expect piggyback data, but it will not have any SNMP. So The reason why I chose Checkmk agent is because I have already installed a Checkmk agent on my 6 nodes. So all I just need to do is now configure those hosts in Checkmk and just do a simple discovery so that my Checkmk monitoring server can contact these nodes over the port 6556 and get the data via the agent. So I think I already removed the checkbox from here. So let's save this DCD rule. Let's not enable the other ones because I want to show you how the nodes looks like. So as soon as we activate this rule, we will see that these nodes have already been created. And on the same page, if I do a next refresh, you will see that the DCD created these nodes and then it started performing service discovery on these nodes. It's trying to contact these hosts via the over port 6556. And when it gets the data via the Checkmk agent, it will add those services here. And on top of that, this is also expecting piggyback data. So what you saw in the temp Checkmk piggyback, there were some GKE hosts. So those were the hosts that were created by the by the Kubernetes integration. So now when we, I will not activate any changes because DCD will do that. I will just refresh the page here. And now the changes, as you can see, the changes were automatically applied. Now let's go to the hosts and we see here now all my nodes are there. My ptribe 29 nodes are there and ttribe 29 nodes are here. So let's look at one of the nodes. For example, let's open this node, which has the most number of services. Now, if you look at the Checkmk service check here, you will see that it is receiving the data from the Checkmk agent, and it is also receiving the data from the piggyback source. In this case, it's ttribe 29. Now, in order to distinguish from which particular source this data is coming from, I have enabled a column check command. So for example, checkmk inventory, these are all the standard ones, which are always there in a host, but then there are K8 conditions. So all the K8 ones, they are coming from, not from the agent because the agent doesn't have any plugin there. It's just a simple plain vanilla agent installed on these nodes. And it's just giving us those standard infrastructure metrics like CPU, memory, kernel, all the disk usage, mount points, uptime, all the standard ones. But all the K8 specific checks, they are coming from Kubernetes. So this is how I mean, if I have to differentiate, there you can also differentiate in other ways. For example, there is a way you can group the service, multiple services into one single service, and you can use regular expressions to combine multiple services and tag that into one single group. It's possible in the global settings. So there are different ways with which you can make out this comes from here, this comes from the piggyback. So now, as you can see, we have all the metrics for our nodes. Now let's go ahead and enable the DCD connection for our other Kubernetes objects. So I will again go to the dynamic host management, and both the rules are identical. Production cluster DCD and test cluster DCD is same. The only difference is that it's for ptribe 29 and ttribe 29. So what I'm doing in the production cluster DCD is I'm actually, let's first activate the connection. And I'm also doing the same thing, searching for a pattern here. Okay, I'm actually searching for a pattern here, which says, look for anything that starts with ptribe 29 daemon set. And whenever you find anything, just add to the ptribe 29 host folder. And within that folder, there is a subfolder daemon sets, just put everything there. And whenever you create these daemon sets, add these host attributes to those daemon sets. Similar way, there are deployments then there are endpoints, then there are ingress, stateful sets, pods, and then there are services. And I'm also choosing this option, delete vanished host, on either of these elements. So what this option is doing, it is automatically deleting these hosts when there are no piggyback data. For example, if you have deleted a pod from your deployment, or you have rescaled it from 5 to 2 and 3 pods are gone, now those are no longer needed in your Kubernetes environment. So Checkmk will detect that, and it will also delete those pods from Checkmk. So that's what the purpose of this option here is. And I will also I've also checked the service discovery so that whenever these piggyback hosts are added, there will also be a discovery that will be performed against these hosts. And I'm restricted this to my source host, which is ptribe29. Rest, all the options remain as default. So, sorry. So let's activate this. Let's save this DCD rule. Similar way, I will also save the DCD rule from my test, the ptribe29 cluster. One thing I have done, one thing I think I have done something extra here was about one of the pods. This was also often a question asked by customers. What if I don't want a particular resource into my monitoring? I mean, with this I can do add everything, but how to exclude? For that, you can use a negative look ahead. For example, faced a similar situation today, that I want to have all my pods, but I don't want a particular pod that starts with the word active MQ. So I used a simple negative look ahead, which means that it will search for all the pods, but not just the active MQ pod, because I wanted to show that for another use case that I have planned for this demo. So let's save this rule. And this rule also has the same configuration settings like the previous rules. So let's activate the changes, and we will see what happens once I click on activate changes. So as you can see right now on the screen, the DCD automatically started creating these Kubernetes objects. And if we just refresh the page, I'm not activating it yet. It's also doing the discovery for these objects. It's in the discovery, what it does, it adds a label if it finds from that particular piggyback connector. And it also adds some services to that. If there are some services found on that particular, then it will also add. So if you can see the message, 7 the 7 were added, 7 total services were kept, and there were 6 host labels that were added. Sometimes there are situations, for example, right now we are adding a bulk addition of the piggyback data. So you have enough time where you can refresh the page. But if there is a addition or deletion of one part, then it's very difficult to find out what happened. There was a yellow here, and after immediately it was gone. Now, if you want to see what actually happened, then you can go to Audit Log. This is actually a very nice feature where we have added enough detailed logging now. So for those kind of scenarios where you want to see what basically happened, then you can click on the related from the same page, click on Audit Log, and you will get this screen. From the audit log, you can filter it. You could add filter it by object. You could filter it by regular expressions. You could also filter it per a specific date that you want. And then you can look back all the changes that you would like to see on this page. All right, so we have added our Kubernetes, all our Kubernetes objects. Let me also refresh the screen, just refresh the browser. Why I refreshed the browser? Because I actually wanted to show you this snap-in folders, which I find very useful in this case, because for example, now I want to see all my pods, which are all my production pods from my production cluster. I can just click on here and it will take me to the page where I can find all my production clusters. If I want to see all my endpoints, which all my test cluster endpoints, then I can just click here and it will show me all the endpoints there. If I want to search anything related to Nginx, then I can directly go to the quick search and search for this. Otherwise, you could also search it with the help of host labels. Like my Nginx deployments have the host label app Nginx. So if I just type in here, it will give me information about my deployments. Similar way, you could also use service labels, host labels. Then there are tags, host tags. So you could use this quick search functionality in order to query your objects based on labels, based on names. You can also specify regular expressions with the negative lookups or positive lookups or look behinds. Yep.
We had a couple of questions in the chat regarding the deletion, the vanished host deletion, and these things around. I'm gonna just ask them to you. One was from Ralph. Are there known problems or possible misconfigurations with the feature deleting vanished hosts? And Christoph had a similar question like this. You probably don't want auto deletion of everything. Yeah, so
that's right.
Like, what can you do around these things?
So if you don't want the auto deletion of everything, so let's go back to our DCD rule. Let's open this one. So as I already shown you, this is like adding an element, and in each element you get this you get this possibility to select this option. It's not like a global option that is selected for all. You can choose this. For example, you don't want your daemon sets to be you want your daemon sets to be deleted. I mean, whenever they are deleted in your Kubernetes environment, you want to delete it from here. But you don't want your deployments, then just unselect that option. Then your deployments won't be removed. So this is the way with which you can control it. Other way would be, I mean, if the same resource comes up with the same name, then it's actually good because then you will not lose the performance data. And if it has the same name, exact same name that what he had before, then you can also use the advantage of the performance data here. Okay, what was the next question, Martin?
Thomas had a good point around the automatic deletion because sometimes you don't want it for nodes. And I mean, the typical thing which we have, like, for example, in AWS, nodes are sometimes recreated and then they change the name. Yeah, but it's essentially the same node. Yeah, and how do I keep
That's
history or consistent graphs? Yeah.
For example, in your Docker containers, if you can add your container with the same name, then it's actually good, because then so for example, I can show you here inside the Prometheus integration. So you have this option to show, you can use the name of the container name. So if you use the name, there's actually a very nice article in our documentation about this particular scenario. where if you use the same name, and I mean, every time you use the same name, whether it's ID change, that's another matter. But if the name remains the same, then you never lose the performance data. It's always there. Of course, there's a glitch because it will be added and removed, which will be, I believe, few minutes or few seconds. But otherwise, if you use the same name, then you don't lose the performance data.
From Michael was another question. I think was related to the DCD as well. If these changes are also committed to the Git or committed to Git.
Mm-hmm. I didn't got the context of the question.
Yeah,
so are we
I'm
saying
not sure
that
entirely as well, but
Mhm.
Maybe I can jump in. This is Michael Frank. So many thanks for this presentation. So we use Git to track all the configuration changes in Checkmk.
You mean
And
in the global settings, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah. And the question was if these changes done by DCD, are these tracked in Git still? Are all these committed to Git, or we don't see this anymore there? So you showed this that it's in the log, okay, but yeah, as we said, we use Git for this.
Yeah, actually, that is something that I have never tried, which is actually first of all, a very good question. And I would definitely like to try this before telling you something that if it works or if there's still any problems over there. I know that I have seen it in some customer installations where they are using Git, but never seen anything related to DCD and Git there. So I will check and let you know.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And one last question before you can continue, because now we are using the Kubernetes special agent to monitor Kubernetes. And we always had the problem that if you have a really new version of Kubernetes, then it didn't support it because we were using the Kubernetes Python implementation of the API, which wasn't keeping up with the speed of the Kubernetes API development as well. Yeah, but maybe you share a little bit what has changed in the last couple of months there.
So now it was definitely the case where the new versions were not working because we had a dependency on the Python Kubernetes client, which is still there. But we had done some changes on our side in our code base where we now start supporting the new versions, but not everything. For example, there will be some file system checks which still don't work, and there's actually a WAC for that. Probably if you go to Checkmk WACs, you will be fine. Just search for the word Kubernetes. It is actually one of the latest WACs from this year, and yeah. But right now I'm monitoring Kubernetes 1.19. I tried 1.20, and apart from some of the checks which I miss when I monitor my 1.16 or 1.15, other than that, I don't see any changes. So the basic things are still there, like the pods, endpoint deployments. Those are still being monitored the same way. But apart from some file system checks, missing file system checks, that is the only difference that I see.
We have another good question on YouTube. And I think it relates very much to what you've also already shown. Like sometimes you have, like if you have jobs running in Kubernetes, then you have these jobs happening very often and they all get added into as host in Checkmk. And is there a way to stop jobs from being added?
Of course, you could also, if there's a specific job name, I mean, if it's just underscore job underscore, then you could either stop it from there, or you don't query them. Or I don't know, do you want to query it at all, or you don't want to query it? Like, if you don't want to query it, then don't choose it here.
Maybe show the DCD rule where you can basically.
So for example,
there are two different ways, yeah, right.
So if you have chosen here, then these jobs will be there. But if there are some certain jobs with a specific naming convention, then you can ignore with a negative look ahead in regex. You could easily negate or ignore these inside DCD so that it never includes that. So you can write a negative look ahead here with the underscore job, or I don't know, it will be maybe, I don't know how you have your data inside your Kubernetes in your Checkmk environment, but I think it should be possible if you really want the jobs, then out of that you can ignore some of the jobs with this from here.
Point is, like, it would be great to see if jobs are failing without them being added as hosts.
Can you elaborate on that? I don't know.
I mean, to know if a job is failing or not is quite is a good information, yeah. So if some jobs are failing, that's always good to know. But the problem is that each job is being added as a host in Checkmk and then deleted again when it's gone, probably, yeah. So you have basically all these hosts being added and removed and things, and the only information you actually want is if some jobs failed. And right now, I think we don't support that, but I think for our future Kubernetes,
no, we don't have anything like that.
Support something like that.
I mean, you could also, if you use Prometheus integration, you could use PromQL to query these kind of jobs that have failed. You can club these two different PromQLs into a single metric, and from there you can find out what are the number of jobs that have failed. But I'm not sure if it's possible from the C advisor to get this information, but directly accessing the job API, it's not possible to find the status directly.
But for our next level of our Kubernetes monitoring, there I would actually plan something like that, in that you see some summary service for your entire cluster to see, okay, which are the jobs which failed.
Yeah, sounds good.
But that's for the future then.
So any further questions?
I think you can for now continue.
Okay. So I was on this page where I showed you the host, and I also showed you these folders where these different hosts are now arranged. So if I delete a pod, I delete a deployment, this will automatically be created in their respective folders, and I don't have to do anything manually. It will be like it will be completely dynamic, automatically added and deleted. And so this is how I made sense out of the data, and basically that's how I made sense of my data with these two simple rules. And now I can now DCD can take care of deleting these objects and making my Checkmk environment up to date. And yeah, that was the completion of my three-step approach. Apart from this, I have wanted to show you something else as well. For example, I have a MySQL pod here in the Checkmk in this monitoring. And what I have done here is this is the pod. Okay, let's first so basically I have what I wanted to show with this specific container or this specific pod is that I'm trying to directly monitor this pod using my MySQL simple MySQL Nagios plugin, which is known as Check MySQL Health. And I have a pod which has exposing an endpoint, and with that endpoint, I am using my Check MySQL. And let us see if I can activate the changes. All right. So basically, I'm not using this. I can attach this results to any of this because I'm hard coding the IP addresses. But this was just to give an idea. I can also do it like I can make it more dynamic by putting a macro with $$ hostname and then also executing. Password, I've hidden that with a macro by storing that in a standard resource.cfg. So this is basically a simple check where it looks for a host name, port, password, and it just looks for a mode. So here the database is up since 5:45 minutes. There is a problem here. I think there might be a typo or I might have missed something there. But yeah, this was just basically an idea how once your pod is inside there, how you can monitor your pod. Apart from that, I also have another pod here, which is active, which was the one where which I ignored using the DCD, and I didn't create it because I wanted to show this special use case. So I don't have a pod, but if I go to my command line.
By the way, you forgot a space. That's why the check isn't working.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
No problem.
So this is the pod which I didn't add it to Checkmk. I did a negative look ahead in there, and I wanted to use this to explaining you some specific use case. So I have my ActiveMQ deployed as a pod, as a deployment, and there's a service for that. So if we see, oh, sorry, I'm in a different. So if I look at all the services, I have my ActiveMQ, which is running on, this is the cluster IP for that. And this is the, let's also look the endpoints. So for my ActiveMQ pod, I have, this is running on the port 8161. And it also has an external IP, but I will be using the one which is provided from the endpoints. So let's now go back to setup and create this host with this IP address. Let me copy the pod again, because otherwise I will forget the name. Okay, so that's the host name, and this is the IP address, and I'm setting everything as the Checkmk. The monitoring agent is set to API integration if configured, else Checkmk agent. Let's save and go to service configuration. And now we will see the information from the Piggyback host. Plus, I have enabled the monitoring via Jalokia. So I have actually created a simple rule here, which is basically using the Jalokia web API. And it's listening to this host. It's configured on this host name, and it's trying to use these credentials to query the Jalokia API. And so I have a pod which was getting the Piggyback information from its control plane node. In addition to that, I'm also monitoring the pod using Checkmk. So this pod is running Apache MQ and has exposes a Jalokia endpoint where I can monitor my JMX metrics. So just using a simple rule, I can monitor my pod as well. And these are all the Jalokia specific checks that you can see in the checkmate as well. So this was actually these two simple use cases which I wanted to show to you. And there was actually one more use case, which is about Fluentd, which we have also. So how to monitor Kubernetes cluster inside the event console. We have given some 2 examples of a Rancher-based installation where you can forward everything from Rancher syslog to Checkmk over port 514. Similar way, Fluentd is a universal logging solution which collects information from multiple data sources. One is syslog. So I have actually deployed a Fluentd daemon set. I have deployed a Fluentd daemon set on my both of the cluster on my clusters, and actually it's only deployed right now on T-Tribe 29, not on the production right at the moment. So it's a daemon set which will spin up 3 pods on either of these nodes, and now these nodes will start sending the metric. These pods will start sending. Will read the log files and will send everything to Checkmk over the port 514. So I have also created a simple rule in the event console, and this rule is basically just look for a string nginx, and it's also looking for a rule for a string MySQL. If there is any issues with, if there are any messages in the logs related to MySQL or nginx, then it will just start creating inside the events. I tested this out. So far, I got 213 hits, but I have archived all the events. Let's see if I scale my Kubernetes deployment. Do we see anything inside dropping in the event console? So this is my Kubernetes deployment, and I have 2 pods at the moment, I guess. And now I would like to scale the deployments. Let's scale it to 10 and see if something gets created inside the event console. So I scale the deployment to 10 now. Now at least I have 10 pods running on my Kubernetes deployment. Let's go back to the web browser and see if something's shown up there. Normally it takes some time because there is a limit in the cloud logging API that it rejects anything. It rejects any thing that comes beyond 256 KBs. So if a log entry is above 256 kilobytes, at least that's the issue that I came across on Google Kubernetes cluster, that whenever I was trying to delete or my deployment, let's try deleting a deployment, and okay, there are something to be activated. Okay, let's activate the changes here. Before I would also like you to show you the configuration, how this has been configured inside Checkmk. To make Checkmk ready to receive the data from Fluentd, you have to do a omd config and go to add-ons, and under add-ons you just have to enable the mk event.d syslog. So the first one is for UDP and the second one is for TCP. So I've chosen both here, but I'm sending only UDP at the moment. So this is one configuration that has to be done on Checkmk side and on your Kubernetes cluster. I downloaded this repo. It's available on the Fluentd official website, Fluentd Kubernetes daemon sets. And in the Fluentd daemon set, syslog, they have actually given an example what they're doing. They are creating a service account, creating a cluster role binding, the similar things what we saw when we created initially the service account that we used to monitor Checkmk, that we used in Checkmk in the data source rule. So, and then they are creating a daemon set in the namespace cube system. And this is the place where you have to specify your syslog host, the details. So this is the IP address of my Checkmk server. And then there is a syslog port and the protocol that I'm using, UDP. There are some resource limits that I have these are the standard ones which have been there, which were there in this YAML file. So I didn't change these values. So I'm just going with these normal values. And when you deploy this YAML file, it will spun up 3 pods on 3 different nodes. Since I have 3 nodes, it will create 3 pods. If I have to look at the pods, so this is how it will now show you all the pods which are running on the different. So this is how it will show it. This is my fluentd running on my node here. So this is my first, second, and third node, and they are running on either of the nodes. Let's see if something got dropped in Checkmk regarding this. If you can see now, there were some messages which was sent to Checkmk, and it came from different rules here. It came from the fluentd host. So in this case, it came only from one fluentd pod. And if we look at these messages, there were no additions, but there were deletions. So as you can see in these messages, there were a delete API requests. So I deleted the complete deployment, and then this fluentd deployed on one of the nodes, detected it, and it started sending messages to Checkmk that this pod has been deleted. Similar way, so it sent the delete API 1, 2, 3, 4, but in total we have 10, and we didn't receive the fluentd the information from the other fluentd pods, to which I have located this issue that this is something which is there in the Google Cloud. There's a limitation either in the size of the packet or the size of the log entry. I have to still investigate more, but on my on-premise cluster, if I do a delete or an add, I could see the messages dropping in. But on the Google Cloud, I see this behavior that it's not immediately picking up or or at least I'm not getting it from all the 3 fluentd pods and just only from one always. And it's not showing me all the pods every time. And when I rescale the deployments, you will see a combination of 2 messages, like a delete and an add on the same node. So if a delete and add happens on the same node, then fluentd on that particular node will first send you a delete message, and then it will also show you an add message. So this was one of the use case that I wanted to try this on Google Cloud, but I'm running into an minor issue here. It shows me the information, but it also, another thing that I noticed here was Google Cloud by default uses Fluent Bit. That's a standard daemon set that always runs on Google Cloud. You can, of course, from the command line, you can control it, how you can, that you don't want to run this logging solution, but I didn't figure out a way how you could do this from the GUI yet. So maybe that is also an issue, but I'm not sure at the moment. So yeah, that was it from my side. If you have any questions, we can discuss them now.
Hey, Sudhir, thanks from my side already.
Yep.
Found it really cool. I haven't seen basically the part with the ActiveMQ monitoring or the JMX monitoring of a pod. Was a new thing for me as well.
If there are questions, feel free to also unmute.
Yeah, I would have a question. I'm not sure. I think because I wasn't paying 100% attention because I had a phone call in between. And did you somehow restrict all the events that come from Fluentd to just something specific, or do you get everything? And because I'm asking because
yes. So for example, yes. So if we go to event console, I have restricted to 2 rules. I just looking for Nginx, but if I just remove these rules, then Fluentd will bombard Checkmk with 1,000 events. I don't know those events. Does it make any sense? Because those events are stripped, and in Google Cloud, I didn't figure out a way yet how you could structure the message in a way. I see that you could do that with the config map, but I will try this on my on-premise cluster to see how you can structure the data. But in Google Cloud, they do have something here. For example, if you open any cluster, let's say here, I hope it opens fast because I didn't refresh the browser for a long time. Okay, yeah. So they do have something which is coming from Fluentd in the logs. And this is actually also not, I'm not able to make a more, for example, it gives some information, but I don't know what exactly. So if I destroy a pod, if I rescale my pod, I see a lot of messages here, but it doesn't tell me exactly that this API call was made or this was the timestamp. Timestamp is fine, but maybe I'm missing something here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
But otherwise, you could write as many rules as you want to restrict the message or look only for a particular message that you are interested in. That's the purpose of Event Console. You could get SNMP traps, logs, and filter it as the way you want. You could also reclassify it. For example, I'm getting everything okay here, but I want to see everything that comes with delete as a critical. Then I can reclassify the event inside Checkmk and raise an alert or notification based on that.
Okay, but the thing is, you're still potentially bombarded with all those events. You're just filtering out the ones you need. So maybe
that's right.
Maybe it would make sense.
I have to control something on
directly at the source. That's because I don't know. Right. Let's say you try to monitor 4 clusters like that. I don't know what how Checkmk will react to so many messages, because I don't know if this is still a part of the actual documentation, but it was said over and over again that Checkmk is not a syslog server.
That's right. It's not a syslog server.
So yeah, and it shouldn't be one, in my opinion. I mean, it's great that you can do that. I haven't thought of that. That's a good idea. Perhaps it would make sense to somehow get node events inside there. That might make sense. And not of pods, you
Yeah,
know.
that's
Only-
actually a good
only
idea
of
to
nodes.
get about node events. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a good idea to get node events, because those are the three machines which are taking the real heat, and it will be very interesting to see how the nodes are performing. So yeah, actually, we could also set up something like that just specifically for the nodes with the regular expressions.
It has a comment. Maybe we can integrate with Loki and use Loki QL.
Yeah, it's actually a good idea for Loki, but I think Thomas or Martin can shed more light on that, because this question was asked in the past as well, and
Yeah, so I don't know the exact answer which we'll have at some point, but we will have an answer. So we are also looking if there's another source which we can use, if we can integrate with another log management tool to get all this data in, but we don't have the answer yet.
all right. Are there any further questions?
Christoph, I think, has a comment related to that as well. Just enable all for a bit, disable, and then look at what is coming in and write your filters.
Yeah, actually, that's the, or you could also restrict it for a particular pod. And if it's the same type of pod, then you can see just restrict it for that particular pod and receive everything. And then also you can decide, or just for deployment, stateful sets, and then you can set 3, 4, 5 filters depending on the number of objects you have. And this is actually also a nice way with which you can get started in regards to filtering.
Ralph also mentioned older conferences using ELK to filter log files.
Yeah, FluentD also tells that, I mean, FluentD works out of the box with solutions like Elk and Lockly, where they also, so I have shown you the configuration for syslog, but they also offer so many here. You can send it to GCS, Elasticsearch, CloudWatch. So syslog is one of the ways which you can send it to a syslog server or send it directly to Checkmk over port 514.
So right. I think that's all the questions we have.
Not many participants, I just realized. No,
Mhm.
not many people are using all of this. Yeah, well, I won't say it. Stuff. Well, I use the word stuff.
Yeah, we also noticed that in our, I think there are a lot of people out there who are even not, who are not even aware of that there are such features inside Checkmk with which you could get these things started. So the basic idea behind this community call was to at least give them a gist of, or maybe like a little bit of hands-on how we can, what this is not the true capabilities of what I showed here. There are obviously more, but this is just like a starting point where I showed them that you have a pod which you can normally you can monitor as like a normal host, or yeah.
No, but I think because I think that was also said in the conference that okay, people are obviously picking up Kubernetes, and there
That's
is
right.
more there is more traction for this particular topic, but it's not like they make it out to be like it's, I don't know, the magic wand for everything and everyone is using it. It's more I don't know. I think it's still early for this kind of thing.
Yeah,
That's
but
right.
if I look at the number of requests we are getting now, yeah,
They're getting more and more. I can
yeah.
imagine. Yeah.
So the number of people who are now coming and asking something around Kubernetes has just immensely increased for us.
No, actually, for us it's similar because I work in a company that has to do with lotteries, and we have actually migrated our legacy application, which was on IX, inside Kubernetes, and split it up into microservices. It works pretty well. It took a few years to do that, but yeah, it's a good development for that. I mean, it's still a little shaky, but it's actually working. So this is something that yeah, Kubernetes is capable of, and is probably the right solution for. So there are certain use cases where it makes sense, but it's not for everything. I don't know. I'm for example, I personally haven't tried to run virtual machines inside of Kubernetes, and I can't imagine that I want to do that. But yeah, okay, it's possible.
Yep. Are you also using the Kubernetes monitoring?
We are using a few shell scripts we have written, and other than that, we are using mainly, and those shell scripts mainly get the information from Heapster, which is installed inside Kubernetes, and this gets the metrics. I mean, it's better than nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So dear, I think there is some time to talk about the Prometheus integration a bit, because I think he had mentioned that. And he commented that he thinks that Prometheus with CMK integration is a better approach. So do you want to talk briefly about that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I have not. I don't have any Prometheus with me at the moment, but I can quickly show you how the Prometheus integration looks like. So the Prometheus integration is the same category, again the same topic, Prometheus, the cloud container, and it's also yeah. So it offers three possibilities. You can configure a custom URL, host name, or an IP address. And by default, the standard port is 1990. But if you do use another port for Prometheus, then you can specify a different port here. We also support basic authentication, where you can specify username and password. And also the possibility to specify HTTP or HTTPS. Sorry. In Prometheus, we support 3 scrape targets. One is the C advisor, which is so these 3 scrape targets were introduced when we initially launched the Prometheus integration, and these were quite popular at that time in their category. For example, C advisor was quite popular in the miscellaneous category, and node exporter is always is anyways the most known exporter when it comes to sending the metrics from your node. Kube state metrics is purely for Kubernetes, and if you want to get your kube state your Kubernetes metrics inside Checkmk via Prometheus, then you have to use kube state metrics. Let's look at one of these. Let's look on one of them. Look at them one by one. For example, if I use kube state metrics, I have to specify a cluster name here. Again, you have the possibility to choose whether you want to use a particular namespace. You can specify a particular namespace here. But if you don't want, you also have the same possibility of choosing a namespace prefix or not using one. And then the number of objects that we fetch, they are less than that, less than the Kubernetes integration. We are only fetching 5 here and not all as we had in Kubernetes, like we had stateful sets of jobs and deployments were there. So those are some of the objects that are missing in the Prometheus integration. And so yeah, that's how the kube state metrics discrete target looks like. Similar way, if we look at the C advisor, here you have multiple possibilities, like you could display the information either for the container, pod, or both. And then if you want to decide the host name, how you would like to see the host names, you could again have different options, like you could use the first 12 characters of your container ID, or just use the long full name of the container ID, or use the container name. Again, you have the possibility here as well to look for specific namespaces, and the metric, the objects remains the same. And I mean, this is the information that you will, these are not the objects, but this is the information that you're going to fetch from your C advisor. And last but not the least is the node exporter. So you can have any number of node exporters, and if you'd like to monitor all of them, then you could map the node exporter to a particular host here, and then you can retrieve the information from about these different metrics from the node exporter. Now, if we don't support these 3 exporters and you would like to try, you have another separate exporter, or you have a custom metric, or you have your developer have instrumented the application, and there are some custom metrics that you are very interested in monitoring them, then you can use the PromQL queries, wherein you could create a service name, like a specific service check that we see in Checkmk, assign it to a particular following host, or if you don't want to assign it, just leave it as it is. Then if you don't assign it here, then automatically this PromQL query will be assigned to the host that you define here, or you could also apply to a tag or a label. There's a metric label. This is the place where you define your PromQLs. So you define a metric label, then you define a PromQL query. The most important thing about the PromQL query is that it should return a single value. And then you define your PromQL query. We also offer the possibility to filter some, we also provide some out-of-the-box metrics inside Checkmk based on standard practices. So you could use these metrics which are already there. Otherwise, you could, if it's just a number, then you could leave it as it is, and then you can adjust those values. Then you can also set thresholds on those values using the lower or upper levels, so that you could draw a graph, or you could want to alert that, or you want to get alerted for that custom metric that you have created using your PromQL queries. And you could also combine the 2 PromQL queries into a single service check. For example, in our documentation, we have an example, processes blocked and processes running, and we combine that into a single service, processes. So similar way, you could do that, something like that, combine 2-3 PromQLs into a single service check. So that's and apart from that, once you have all your information, then the piggyback functionality of getting the piggyback data inside Checkmk remains the same that I showed you in regards to Kubernetes integration. Yeah, so yeah, that's pretty much I don't have a live Prometheus cluster with me at the moment, so I can't show you exactly how the metrics are there and how I can use the DCD to create them automatically inside Checkmk.
Ziad has a question. So about C Advisor, if a container or pod goes down, it will send an email, right?
Yes, if you have configured the notification on that particular host or the service check, then it will definitely do that. So if it is detected as a critical inside Checkmk, depending on what you have configured, it will alert you accordingly.
All right. Ralph's asking, any plans to make the selection of Prometheus more easy with active pull downs?
Token-based.
Was
speaking.
that Martin?
Martin on a train.
Ah, okay.
Oh,
Martin, were you supposed to answer the question? Oh,
Perhaps his laptop is overheating again.
no, it's actually on the way already.
yeah, I'm on the way, but you can't hear me, I guess. Yeah.
We can
No.
hear you now.
Now we can hear you.
Okay, so I don't know what is happening on the chat because I'm on the bicycle right now in the rain, cycling home. But there are two things which I want to share because I mean, for the ones who are still here, that's maybe nice to know information. So we're currently discussing with the customer a feature request, and we are planning to do that soon. To support token-based authentication for Prometheus, which is relevant for OpenShift.
Yep.
And the other thing is monitoring of the Prometheus Alert Manager. And if the customer says yes, he will pay for it, and then we will start doing it soon. Yeah.
That's right.
How about Ralph's question? So did you hear the question? I'm not sure if you heard that part. Any plans to make the selection of Prometheus more easy with active pull downs?
Don't know. Don't think so. Not for now.
All right, then.
We like to make Ralph's life really hard.
Yes.
That's a dangerous ride home. I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe you should
we
prefer
hope
to ride
you're-
home first, and
Yeah, please reach safely home.
we can't be responsible for your injuries.
Yes.
Right.
And we want to see you live tomorrow.
Okay, then. Yeah, I think that's everything that we have on the agenda. So I have just one last thing. Can I share my screen a bit? So you're right. Just
Yeah, sure.
please share your feedback about the community call using this link. Just scan it with your phone. We want to hear if this time works for you, if there's any topic you want us to discuss, or if you want to talk in the next community call, feel free to just reach out and just let us know how we can improve the community call.
Okay, at the risk of revealing of how old I really am, will something like that also be sent via an email or something like that? I mean, I can't scan the QR code right now, but let's.
Right, I will also post the link on the forum.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't worry about that. Right. I was just thinking that, oh, people will have their screens full. So yeah, let's use a QR code. Right. So
you see, the medium I prefer most still do is a pencil and a piece of paper.
Right. So you will have to. I will have to send you the survey, right?
Yes,
I'll mail you.
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay, then that concludes our community call for tonight. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks Sudhir for your presentation. Thanks Martin for answering a lot of questions, and Thomas if he's still there. Thanks a lot for the presentation. Thanks a lot for coming, everyone. Hope to see you again next time.
Thank you.
Then,
Thank you for your time too.
Thank you, everybody.
bye-bye.
Bye bye. Have a nice evening.
You too.
Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.